But let's go across now to Finance Minister Arun Jaitley. He is addressing the Indian Bank Association's AGM. Let's listen in.
I think we really have to look at the scenario in the country in the midst of the global situation today and then analyze where do we stand as far as the banking institutions are concerned, what are our challenges, and what is it that we need to re-prepare ourselves. There is an uncertain world global situation. In fact, post-2008, it has really not settled down. Events take place with frequency, which in a globalized world impact on every economy in some measure or the other. If we look at our own position, I think as we stand today, what doesn't appear to be a great problem, and it seems to be an optimistic picture, is that we are continuing our run as a fast-growing economy in the world. In fact, the last 4 years we've been the fastest-growing economy in the world, and I have no doubt in my mind that for the next few years we'll continue to occupy that sweet spot. Even this year, I have little doubt that our growth rate is going to be somewhat higher than what conventionalists are projecting. And there are several indications which come. The current consumption boom, the hugely expanding middle class and the neo-middle class, the purchasing power which is expanding by the day, a good monsoon this year. In fact, last 3 years we've been privileged to have a better monsoon. Prior to that we had 2 bad years. And therefore, correspondingly the credit uptake building up, I think settles that key worry as far as the domestic growth is concerned. Our macroeconomic fundamentals have been reasonably sound, and if at all any gets impacted, it's not going to be on account of any internal factors. The management of the economy has reasonably disciplined itself in decision making as far as our internal factors are concerned. Our challenges are really external. And in the external challenges, the unpredictability and the volatility of the oil prices, which is on account of either created shortages or on account of some geopolitical issues. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed, hopefully, that these challenges will not go on indefinitely. They have to resolve themselves. That's how the world moves. Coupled with this is the challenge of trade wars. Though we are not an active participant in this, but the impact and the footprints of that can be seen in India, particularly when there is a tendency of some large economies to either devalue or undervalue their currencies, and therefore that has a regional impact which also impacts us. And of course then there are sporadic political issues which impact on the economy of some country, And that has a spiral effect across the world, Turkey being the latest example. And if we see our key challenges over the last few months, it's really been the external factors. And therefore it is all the more incumbent on us to ensure that our domestic parameters are kept strong, that we have the resilience to face the challenge of these external factors. High growth rate, fiscal prudence, a lot of economic activity in the domestic market, and conventionally with a series of reforms which have taken place in the last few years have certainly helped the economy. And in a growing economy, the obvious advantage is that even revenues grow. The last 4 years have seen both the assessee base and the taxation collections, because of use of technology, some other policy decisions taken by the government and the growth of the economy, the coffers of the government also improve. And therefore the ability of the government to spend on infrastructure, to spend on social infrastructure, to make investments in rural areas, enhance government spending, also leads to a spiral as far as economic activity is concerned. But then we cannot move our eyes away from the fact that one of the key domestic challenges for the last few years has been the challenge to the banking institutions itself. And this challenge really has, over the last 1 decade, a history. I do not believe in a blame game, because a blame game doesn't resolve the roadmap for the future. But it is extremely important for all of us to learn the relevant lessons. And one lesson that I have learned is that when we desire to have a high growth rate, it must be accompanied by strong macroeconomic fundamentals. If we start sacrificing our macroeconomic fundamentals in order to temporarily push up the growth, then we are hurting ourselves elsewhere. And that is bound to strike back at the economy at some point of time. And therefore, for the management of the economy, growth with fiscal prudence, growth with macroeconomic fundamentals, and therefore growth with the normal reasonable credit offtake. And therefore, if we have growth which is engineered on the strength of a 31% or a 28% credit offtake in a given year, then history will certainly record it as some indiscriminate lending, which is bound to show its impact on a future date. And I think this is one lesson that all of us must learn from. Moderation, rather than just running after figures. And the result of this has been that we ended up creating surplus capacities when we did that kind of indiscriminate lending about a decade ago, we ended up funding projects which were unable to service the kind of debt that they had created. And needless to say, some of them must also have indulged in fraudulent practices, as some more controversial cases have shown. And once we commit that error, the next error that we committed was that we started dressing up. And therefore, once you dress up, you start evergreening the entire monies which are owed to the banking system. Having said that, I think we then, in the third phase, struggled to find methodologies of how to effect recoveries. The Reserve Bank came out with certain schemes, the bankers tried it. And I have earlier, while addressing the State Bank of India conclave through this very mechanism, I had said, we had created a system where we had reduced the ability of our bankers also to find solutions. Because the regime under which we wanted them to find was not a regime of comfort. It is not, everybody must be accountable, but we were holding them accountable. Some element of play of joints. Some element of play of joints in commercial transactions must exist. And therefore, some commercial judgment must be left to the wisdom of the bankers itself. We had a vague penal law, the Prevention of Corruption Act, which was a carryover of the regulatory regime because it was enacted in 1988, pre-1991. And therefore, the indiscriminate use of it, even in relation to honest decisions, which by passage of time turned out to be either erroneous or didn't commercially succeed. I think we reduced the ability of the bankers to settle those issues. And therefore we landed ourselves in a situation where a high debt had been created. We were dressing up the debt. The various circulars and the systems which we had created were not able to adequately resolve it. And then one of the factors which led to disability or inability to resolve was the fear of consequences. And therefore it's extremely important for us to mince no words and honestly analyze as to the root cause of the problems that have arisen before us. Indiscriminate lending to chase growth at the cost of macroeconomic fundamentals was a policy mistake. Dressing up was a consequence. The resolution mechanism was inadequate. And the consequences of the resolution mechanism were fearful and penal. And therefore you needed to learn from this and rewrite the system. Fortunately,
it took all of us some time to honestly realize the root causes. We now have been putting systems in place in order to strengthen this situation. And those systems have led to the creation of the IDC, since it has a statutory backing and resolution is by a quasi-judicial process. I think it's redefined the creditor-debtor relationship as far as India is concerned. We lived in a society where the creditor would indefinitely chase the debtor. Today the roles have been reversed. Debtors had also learned how to get around the Securitization Act. That was one measure which had also changed this relationship, but they had learned how to get around it. And I think this arrangement is working satisfactory. There has been some early harvest. And therefore the need now is that we expedite the process. And for expediting the process, I am given to understand that we need to even augment our capacities as far as the NCLT and the NCLT are concerned. That is something which is work in progress. And I'm sure over the next few months, this will lead to the further expedition of this process. This chain of relationship has also had a salutary effect. When we brought the first amendment to Section 29A, the whole idea was to prevent the defaulting promoters from bidding. And the ethical principle behind that was that if the defaulting promoter bids and gets back the company at, let us say, a fraction of the original cost, then nothing changes except the bankers having taken the hit or the creditors having taken the hit. And that would have been something which is at least...
Right, so that was Finance Minister Arun Jaitley giving a lowdown on the state of the economy. On that note, we'll slip into a short break. Coming up on the other side, plenty of news and updates, that on CNBC TV18.